Hello. My speech today is to persuade the audience to overturn Initiative 77 in the Washington, D.C. area. Do you, as a person who eats at restaurants, want to see the prices of food increase? We constantly hear of the fluctuations of prices in food, but did you ever know that it can affect the entire restaurant industry? Well, let me tell you that with the introduction of Initiative 77 in the Washington, D.C. area, we will see the prices of food increase while also seeing the entire restaurant industry change significantly. So, for those of you that don't know, Initiative 77 is a Washington, D.C. voter approved ballot initiative, and this is to phase out the minimum wage exemption for tipped employees. This means it will affect servers, bartenders, from taxi cabs to nail polish workers. It will affect the entire tipped employee industry. Initiative 77 is going to affect approximately 6 million Americans who live off of tips. And this means that if you go out to eat at restaurants, you could see an increase in all food items on the menu to be able to compensate for the minimum wage rising. As for myself, I work as a tipped employee, as a waitress in the restaurant industry. This will affect my income because I will not be able to bring home tips every night. Instead, I will get a bi-weekly check and work based off of an hourly wage. And to be honest, the tipped employee industry has never seen this. So thus, meaning I would not be making as much money as I would when I actually could have used my own work ethic to get a better tip payoff at the end of each of my shifts. I mean, who wants to work hourly wage if you're not getting tipped? And who wants to put up with those customers in the restaurant industry who always have something to say if I know I'm still getting that hourly wage? So, with the implementation of Initiative 77, it can negatively affect many restaurant industry's employees and their families. Initiative 77 brings many negative impacts on one's financial status. One main contribution to this is that the creators of Initiative 77 believe that increasing a server or bartender's minimum wage from $3.33 an hour to $12.50 will relieve all financial burdens for these employees. And this is false. This would mean that all restaurants would not be tip-based anymore, thus meaning that restaurant employees will actually be making less money than they normally would with tips. And who wants that? This is because it is seen that more and more servers and bartenders make more on average than the minimum wage on an average shift. And we all know that's true for anyone that has worked in the restaurant industry or knows that someone has worked in the restaurant industry. This in turn will create a financial burden for the entire restaurant industry and their employees in of itself. Eliminating the tipped wage doesn't just increase labor costs, it also raises insurance premiums, payroll taxes, and taken together, these increases will amount to more than the 20% tip that the employees get on to help cover a server's salary. Thus, seeing all the costs across the board at restaurants with increasing the implementation of Initiative 77, it will only in turn hurt the entire restaurant industry. As you can see in my PowerPoint provided in slide number 2, this is people protesting the rise of the minimum wage when they found out about Initiative 77 being implemented. For restaurants to be able to compensate for the increased wages that their employees need, the restaurants would have to increase their prices on the menus. And as you can see in slide number 3 in the PowerPoint provided, this is an example of a restaurant named Joe's Crab Shack. This is the before and the after of what they showed of their menu, and this is how they had to compensate for having to pay their employees. So they had to actually increase all the prices in their menus, and this is what the effect was for increasing minimum wage. This is what the restaurants had to do. So this is also being seen in all restaurants in DC. And they will know a lot of restaurants in DC won't even be able to stay open if this initiative goes into action, because this will impact a lot of restaurants' entire business model, because they're going to have to figure out how to pay the minimum wage and keep certain employees. So they would not be able to pay all their employees the same minimum wage because people would quit. Because who's going to put up with all those customers who always have to complain, send food back and all that stuff if they know they're still going to get that hourly wage? I mean, let's be real. So a famous restaurant in DC that most of you probably know, Hank's Oyster Bar, said that they ran the numbers, and when they found out about the implementation of Initiative 77, and said it would impact the bottom line so drastically that they would actually have to change the entire business model. This includes all Hank's Oyster Bars in the Washington, D.C. district area. And the owner actually said she expects to raise prices up to 40% if the initiative passes. This would mean that their one signature item, the lobster roll, would cost $35 instead of $25, which it's at before the initiative passed, which is crazy. Part of this price bump would go to her cooks, she said, because she wanted to maintain a kitchen hierarchy. She even said, how can she hire a dishwasher for $15 and pay her cooks $15? For a senior line cook, she would have to change the minimum wages for them in her own restaurant, because who's going to stay there if they're getting the same amount as a dishwasher is getting? So with having to keep the social hierarchy in the restaurants, they would have to raise other employees' wages to keep them wanting the job. So with the increased wage, most restaurants cannot afford to pay all their employees the new wage. This will lead to a highly competitive market for a job in the restaurant industry, because not every restaurant can afford to have all the employees that aren't always doing their job to the best of their abilities. They would want the best employees who can serve their customers and keep a great review. This can lead to firing employees that they cannot afford to pay, and this can also lead to the closing of many restaurants, which, as you can see in slide number 4, this is a DC restaurant called Piola, which I'm sure most of you have heard about, for having their famous 10-cent wine night, which had to close because they could not increase their prices on the menu and still keep the restaurant open with keeping customers coming, which is so sad. Do we want to see this in all our DC restaurants? No. But for example, when I worked as a server at Union Pub near Capitol Hill, for a year, our manager stressed the importance of wanting to overturn Initiative 77 because it was going to not only affect myself as an employee, but it's also going to affect my income. This is crazy. And I would not have been making the money I would off tips anymore. On an average 8-hour shift when I was working there, I would leave with over $200. That's awesome. But if Initiative 77 was implemented, I would only be living with $100 a shift. That's crazy. This is hard to make as a college student when you are having to pay for your own tuition and loans. Since the proposed legislation would increase payroll costs, small businesses may not be able to finance the increased costs, leading to the loss of jobs and the shutdown of businesses. Restaurants would become a more riskier investment due to this, and first-time business owners may face more challenges with opening their business. As you can see, with this initiative, servers and bartenders' minimum wage increased from $3.33 an hour to $12.50 an hour. Servers and bartenders always make more than $12.50 an hour to begin with off their own tips. And I'm sure most of you know that from knowing family members or being in the industry yourself. With having to compensate for this increased wage, it led restaurants to having to increase the prices on their menus, and this in turn led to a decreased volume of customers in the restaurants. With the increased wage, restaurants cannot afford to pay all their employees the minimum wage of $12.50. This led to the restaurant industry jobs becoming more competitive because the better servers who can handle more tables would get the job over the inexperienced worker looking for the restaurant job. This then leads managers to fire employees who do not have a good work ethic because it can tarnish the restaurant's name and credibility. So, you, as an audience member who heard how Initiative 77 negatively impacts the entire restaurant industry and all the individuals and family members that you know, I want you to think of all the family members and friends in the industry that you personally know or have known that have been in that industry. Would you want to put them in a financial situation where they are relying on minimum wage when they are making more on tipped wages before? No. So please, go and vote to overturn Initiative 77 in the Washington, D.C. area now. We've had this growth in terms of restaurants opening, neighborhoods growing, and employment rising in our communities. That will be able to continue. If we overturn Initiative 77, workers will be able to continue earning the income that they were or have, and the ability to earn in our industry that provides upward mobility of getting more and more money. And we want this for our community and our family members and ourselves that are in the industry. And I want you all to know and remember that I don't know a single person working in a Washington restaurant that isn't making at least double the minimum wage. So, has anyone seen Initiative 77 personally affect their own income? Has anyone seen Initiative 77 affect their own family or friends negatively? Thank you.